Ever find yourself, like, daydreaming about that perfect life?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one where you're not, like, drowning in bills and clutter and to-do lists.
Yeah.
And where wealth means something more, like more than just a big bank account.
I like that.
Well, that's what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack these core ideas of minimalist living.
Okay.
But get this. It's about way more than just decluttering your closet.
Right.
Though let's be real, who doesn't love a good closet clean out?
Absolutely.
But we're talking bigger picture here. We're talking about how minimalist principles can actually impact, well, everything. Your finances, your mental state, your health, your relationships, even your relationship with your phone.
It's a whole lifestyle.
One of the sources we dug into had this killer quote: "True wealth is freedom." Basically, it argues that real wealth comes from needing less stuff to be happy.
Okay.
Which then, like, frees you from that constant pressure to earn more, buy more, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but that really resonated with me.
It's interesting, right? It really challenges that traditional idea of wealth, doesn't it? It's not about just accumulating more, but about, like you said, that freedom that comes from needing less.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's so appealing about it to so many people. It shifts the focus from acquiring possessions to finding contentment in what we already have.
I love that.
And by needing less to feel satisfied, we unlock these really valuable resources, time, energy, and yes, even money, that we can then use in more intentional ways.
It's like you're breaking free from that whole keeping up with the Joneses thing.
Totally.
And saying, you know what? I'm going to define what success means to me.
Exactly. You get to decide what's important to you. And there's actually research that backs this up, which I think is fascinating.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. There is a study from the Journal of Positive Psychology.
Okay.
And it found that people who identified as minimalist actually had higher levels of life satisfaction.
Wow.
And lower levels of stress.
Interesting.
And they weren't necessarily making more money. It's just that they were happier with what they had and they felt more in control of their lives.
Okay, so there's actual research that supports this idea.
Yeah.
Wild. It's like decluttering your mind along with your physical space, you know? Speaking of mental clutter, another source we looked at really dives into this concept of mental minimalism.
It makes sense when you really think about it.
Yeah.
You know, like feeling overwhelmed by this jam-packed schedule.
Right.
Or a to-do list that's a mile long.
Ugh, yeah.
And all those notifications constantly buzzing on your phone.
It's like our brains are on a hamster wheel these days, you know?
Exactly. That's the opposite of freedom, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So how does mental minimalism actually help with that? Like, what can people do?
Well, it starts with awareness, I think.
Okay.
Like recognizing that your mental energy, it's precious and it's
Right.
limited. You can't
Yeah.
do it all. Trying to just leaves you feeling, drained.
Yeah, no one wants that.
Exactly. So instead of saying yes to every single request, to every invite,
Oh, that's hard.
it is. But mental minimalists, they get really good at saying no to anything that doesn't truly align with their values and goals.
I like that. Setting those boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries are huge, GE.
So you can actually, like, focus on what matters most to you.
Exactly. It's about those intentional choices.
So give me an example, like, what would that look like day to day?
Sure. It could be something as simple as creating routines to simplify your mornings. Or maybe planning your meals ahead of time.
So you're not staring into the fridge at 7 p.m. wondering what to make for dinner.
Exactly.
Been there.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not about emptying your mind completely.
Right.
It's more like being intentional about what you allow in there.
Yes. You got it. And this whole idea of intentional living, it applies to way more than just our, thoughts and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
The source material, it also touched on minimalism in health, relationships, even technology.
Okay, so it really is about way more than just owning fewer things.
Right. It's a whole life philosophy.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into these other areas a bit.
Sounds good.
Starting with health. I was struck by how, simple and straightforward the source material was with its recommendations.
Oh, yeah.
It was basically like, nourish your body with good food, move regularly, prioritize rest.
The basics.
Yes, like they're saying, skip the expensive fads and just focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah, and I think that's what I appreciate most about the minimalist approach to health, you know?
For sure.
It cuts through all the noise, all the latest diet trends, fitness crazes.
Right.
And brings us back to what truly matters for our well-being.
It's like we're always looking for that quick fix, that magic pill.
Right, instead of focusing on the sustainable, long-term habits that truly make a difference.
Totally. Okay, so we talked about health. What about relationships?
Ah, yes. relationships. Well, one of the sources, it really emphasized this idea of quality over quantity.
Oh, yeah, that resonates.
It really struck a chord with me, too, because honestly, I think we've all felt that pressure at some point,
Too.
to like maintain this huge social circle, even if it leaves us feeling, honestly, a little drained.
100%, like you're spreading yourself too thin.
Exactly. And minimalism, in this context, it encourages us to be more intentional, about the relationships we really invest our time and energy in.
So it's not about like cutting people out or anything.
No, not at all. It's more about, I think, nurturing those deep, meaningful connections.
The ones that really bring us joy, offer support.
Yes, exactly. It's about being more present, more engaged in the relationships that truly matter.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot, but we can't wrap up this deep dive without talking about technology, right?
Oh, technology. A constant presence in our lives.
I think it's safe to say we have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it these days.
Definitely. I mean, it's amazing, right? All the things we can do, the connections we can make.
Right.
But it's also, like, so easy for it to become a distraction, a source of overwhelm, even.
Totally. That reminds me of something one of the sources called it, a double-edged sword.
Oh, I like that.
Right?
It is. It really is. Because on one hand, it has this incredible potential to simplify our lives.
For sure.
But if we're not careful, it can easily take over,
It's like that saying, we check our phones 150 times a day for the fear of missing out, but what if we're missing out on our actual lives?
Ugh, that hits hard, doesn't it? And I think that's the key with minimalism and technology, right? It's about being mindful.
Intentional.
Yes. Setting those boundaries like we talked about before.
Give me some examples. Like, what could that look like?
Sure. It could be something as simple as like turning off notifications,
Yeah.
so you're not constantly being pulled in a million directions.
Oh, I need to do that.
Right. It's so freeing. Or maybe scheduling specific times to check email and social media instead of letting them bleed into every moment of your day.
Yes. Create those boundaries.
And then I think being really selective about the apps we allow on our phones.
Oh, good point.
Do they actually add value to our lives, or are they just sucking up our time and attention?
So it's like, instead of letting technology dictate how we spend our time,
we get to decide. We take back control.
I like that. Take back control. It all comes back to intentionality, doesn't it?
It really does. And remember, minimalism, it's not about deprivation. It's not about having nothing. It's about creating space for the things that truly matter. By simplifying our belongings, our schedules, our digital lives, we free up all this time and energy to focus on, what brings us joy?
Our passions, our loved ones, our own well-being.
Exactly. It's about designing a life that truly aligns with our values and priorities, not the values and priorities of, everyone else.
I love that. So as we wrap up here, I'm curious, what's one thing our listeners can take away from all of this?
As you've been talking about this, I've been thinking about how it's really all about the small steps,
Okay, I like that.
It doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing. Minimalism. Start small. Start with one area that resonates with you.
So maybe it's finally clearing out that junk drawer that's been bugging you.
Yes. Or maybe it's unsubscribing from those email lists you never open.
Or even just being more intentional about scheduling time for activities that, light you up inside.
Exactly. Find what works for you. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah, exactly. Take it one step at a time. Be patient with yourself and enjoy the process, because ultimately it's about creating a life with more intention, more freedom, and more joy.
I love that. More intention, more freedom, more joy. Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch you next time.